a word that is not used in any of this. Why not inspiration? Why is this word not on the list? And it's not just on my list, it's not on Metzger's list either.
Everything should be inspired?
No, that's a good one, right? But there's an answer to this. Why not inspiration? Why does this word not make the list? Jump and see these pictures coming up. Well, the Bible, or more technically, a Christian letter claims that it's inspired by God, and here's the word. Here's the verse. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God. The word in Greek literally means God breathed. Theopneustos, God breathed. Huh. Wouldn't this be an awesome thing to do, to say, well, we're picking these books because these were the ones inspired? Why did the early church fathers not use this word? And I give you this because very often the argument I heard was they're all inspired. I'm like, well, how do you know they're inspired? Well, they're in the Bible. Well, let's sort of do this. Well, first here's, what does inspiration mean? So I'll give you a couple of examples of inspiration. Here's a beautiful painting by Caravaggio. He was commissioned to do this painting for a cathedral, and he returned this painting. It's in black and white, not because the original was in black and white, but it has since been destroyed. Well, what does Matthew look like in this picture?
He's old.
So let's see Matthew here. Does he look wise?
He was average, yeah.
Common. Yeah, he looks like, a common, everyday person. He doesn't look like our image of, the inspired, whatever. And notice how he's barefoot, and he, what's the angel doing here?
She's like, oh, let me help you write this.
No, he's not helping you write this, but literally writing it. Well, the church rejected this one. They said, we do not want this picture at all. This does not represent Matthew. So he repainted it.
Now he looks like a man of stature. Like he's got money.
He's got authority.
He's got authority. He look, he's even got a little halo, just in case, you can't see it. But here's what's the most interesting issue here for me. I'm going to give you a third painting here in a second by Rembrandt. These say different things about inspiration. In this one, inspiration means what?
Literally written by a godly person.
Literally written. What about this one?
Spoken.
Spoken to, yeah, but in this one, every single word is being written by a godly person. In this one, is every single word being chosen?
Paraphrased.
You get a little interpretation. Do these differences play out in our culture today?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. There are some churches and some denominations which take this vision of interpretation, where literally every word matters. There's one that I'll take special mention because I just don't even know how they have come up with this view. There's one group who are arguing that the only real one is the King James. And I don't even know how that one came about. It's like, wait, so the King James is a translation from an original, so wouldn't the original actually be the real one? But neither here nor there. Here's another Matthew and angel. How does Matthew look here? What? What is it?
I just find it very mean.
Mean?
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't find him mean. I find him very thoughtful. But how does this view of inspiration conflict, or so not conflict, but contrast with the previous two? In this one, is every word being chosen? No. What?
Still being interpreted.
Still being interpreted. This one really strikes me as more that he's like, remind them, remember to write about the time they were in the wheat field, right?
Hey, put this in there too.
Yeah, this one strikes me as more that way, especially as compared to the first one, right? You know, this one seems more like, okay, remember when you were on this, remember y'all were on that mount? Remember to write about, you know, blessed are these people, and however, you know, and the others too, right? And do we find this sort of three divisions of inspiration in our culture? Like if you were going through denominations, you were going, okay, these people are definitely Caravaggio A, these people are definitely Caravaggio B, and Rembrandt. We can think of denominations who are as religious, but they definitely are less, every word is as essential. Right? So we could quiz and go, which one are y'all? But more interesting, this is one of the reasons inspiration was not used. But what's intriguing is inspiration, how it is used plays a big role. If someone says, this is the book we reverence, and every single word was inspired, you can see how that's going to affect
Society.
what?
Society.
Society, yeah. You know, and at different time, places in our country's history, we've had different aspects of this. Where sometimes it's been literally every word, right, the Puritan era. And then other times where it's like, no, make sure you are in accordance with moving to Caravaggio B and Rembrandt. But there's other reasons that inspiration wasn't used. I'm not going to say they used the word inspiration to refer to everything, like I use the word awesome to be like, oh, I like that. But they use the word inspiration a lot. So it isn't like the only time inspiration was used, it was in this particular verse. We have Constantine was said to be inspired. Augustine, the great Christian theologian, said that Jerome was inspired. The word was used a lot. So it wasn't this special one-off word that was never ever used again. They used this word a fair amount. So that's why it wasn't used. Also, as a historical note, even if it were the case, the Jewish canon wasn't actually finished until after that verse was written, so it couldn't refer to that. The Christian canon wasn't finished until 200 years later, so it couldn't refer to that. So what would the word actually refer to? Right? It's one thing to go, all Scripture is given, but if you don't know what the Scripture is, it really sort of, you can't. I mean, unless you're going to go, well, somebody knew what would be the final tally, and so that's what it meant. On any account, when people use the argument that it's all inspired, that's why it's in there, that is extraordinarily historically inaccurate. Very, very inaccurate. Inspiration was not a criterion used by the actual people choosing it. What they did use, though, was conformity and authority. So I find this fascinating.
The people that were brought together, I don't know who it was,
Yeah.
sorry. But I don't know who it was, that decided, okay, we need to get together. Did they choose people that would have differing opinions, or no, did they want?
Well, there was some different.
I mean, I know there was a
opinion.
differing opinion.
And that was actually what, if I'm not mistaken, the first one was called, and this is where people online are gonna, that makes sense. The first one, if I remember correctly, was actually called by Constantine, because after his conversion, he was upset that there was such a divergence of opinion. He was like, we need to have, it's going to be a empire-wide religion, we need to agree on some facts about him, and from that came the Apostles' Creed, which was, this is the essence of Christianity.
But so when he did he invite those that he thought were doing the proper?
He invited,
you know how
yeah.
there was a different level. Okay, no, you're not really. Yeah, you kind of are.
Well, there was a divergence of opinion amongst the people that were invited. Like some people liked a certain text and some people liked others. But there definitely was, even prior to this, that the Christian hierarchy said, we're the real ones. You Docetics, you Gnostics are not.
Right.
So those were I don't know off the top of my head, there were none there. They certainly, by this point, you already have a hierarchy. And you already have this is the real one. And Augustine's writing against some of these people and so forth. So I don't know the people that were there. And if you would like to look up to see how much divergence there was, that'd be great. Anyway, that'd be a great extra credit question. I don't know how you would answer it. But there are books written on these synagogues. As Metzger, here's my buddy, and so this is from one of his books. He writes, "A writing is not canonical because the author was inspired, but rather the author is considered inspired because what he's written was recognized as canonical." And for the record, Bruce Metzger this is someone who's deeply religious. He's at Princeton Theological Seminary. He's very deeply religious. He's not trying to attack or tear down. He's trying to give an historical accounting of how these books were chosen. But there's a sense in which you're forced to go, that seems rather conformity and authority-ish. It's like we all accept that this is the way it's going to be, and then later we go, oh, that book was accepted, or so we're going to trust that book because we've accepted that book. So this is Bruce Metzger. He's written some wonderful, wonderful things. Well, this has left us with some sort of oddities in the Christian scriptures. We're sort of left with some odd features. I only want to focus on one right now, though there are many other odd features that you're sort of left to go, what do we do with that? I'll give you one that's not in your text or not in the notes. There is a very famous story of Jesus and a woman taken in adultery. Love this story. I don't know what that says about me, but I do. I really love the story. And it's hard to know if that's actually a true story because it appears in multiple places in multiple manuscripts. In fact, if you go home this evening and if you own a Bible and you look, there'll very often be a note next to it saying, it is not clear where this belongs. But I want to focus on one because I find this one to be sort of most interesting for me. If you look at the Gospel of Mark, and I'll tell you what's going on here, it ends, and I'll just give you where it is, so you can read this along. And so here's a translation of what's happening over here. And then we just have notes saying that it's done. Well, there are some things that are missing here. For example, the story does not end with Jesus rising from the dead. In fact, it ends with the women being scared and running away. There's some verses here that many people treat as very, very important that are not here. For example, passages about taking up serpents are not here. Right? There's some denominations that as a central feature of their denomination is we can hold snakes and if they bite us, we'll live. That aren't in the manuscripts we have, or the earliest manuscripts that we have. What are we supposed to do about those passages? They're not in the earliest manuscripts, but it's likely that Mark actually wrote something after this point. Otherwise, no one would have started this religion. Anyone want to guess what the position was? Even though those verses are not in the earliest manuscripts, were likely not written by this author?
Aren't they usually included, but they're denoted as non-traditional manuscripts?
They are noted that. There's usually, like if you go this evening, you'll see a little asterisk next to these as well.
It'll be like, right.
But you sort of think about this for a second. You have a little asterisk noting that these verses were probably not written by whoever the original author was. So, in a sense, you shouldn't treat them as part of the original, but anyone want to guess how they're actually treated? part of it, so, all right. They just became accepted.